Parenting is really, really hard. It's messy, unpredictable, and sometimes involves extensive negotiations as to why wearing pants is not optional. But there is a famous internet personality who claims that it could all be much simpler. All you need to do is enforce super strict rules, use whatever force necessary, break the children's will, and if they don't eat, that's easy. Just force feed them. Buckle up, because today we're diving into 5 reasons why you shouldn't be taking parenting advice from Jordan Peterson. Peterson's fans see him as a genius. His critics see him mostly as a guy who overcomplicates the obvious. Either way, Jordan Peterson has been on the arena for a while. He rose to prominence by completely misinterpreting Canadian law. He went on to become a culture war icon, sell millions of books, and branch out from free speech to equally misguided advice on literally everything else, from geopolitics to, as you've guessed it, parenting. For example, his book, 12 Rules for Life, includes a whole chapter on parenting. Let's just say it's really, really something else. So the first reason why you should be skeptical of Peterson's parenting advice is because he treats it as a mere PR campaign as opposed to a mission of raising a human. Basically, his core philosophy around it is really simple. You must never let your kids do things that make you dislike them, because if you dislike them, then the society will too, and then all hells will break loose on them. And as with much of Peterson's advice, you can sort of unpack it and see a tiny grain of truth in it. For example, it's not really necessary to explain why it's beneficial to teach your kids politeness, social customs, being appropriate, etc. However, Peterson takes it to a whole new level, and this basically starts from toddlerhood, so never mind that the developmental stage of those tiny children is basically to poke at everything and see how the world works. For example, if your child is repeatedly inserting a fork into a power outlet, one could argue that removing the fork and covering the outlet would be a suitable course of action. However, instead, Peterson subtly, and not so subtly, encourages corporal punishment. Child psychologists certainly do not agree with Jordan Peterson on this one either. According to modern research, kids don't need to be extensively trained into likability. First and foremost, they need to learn things like emotional regulation, empathy, and autonomy, which takes years of development and patient parenting. We're just warming up. And as a university-trained dietitian, this next one is my personal favorite. Jordan Peterson is absolutely obsessed with family eating and the way kids eat, and not for good reasons at all. In the chapter of his 12 Rules for Life book, he tells not one but 2 stories about force-feeding children, and spoiler alert, he sees it as a good, desirable thing. The first one is about his neighbor who was really distressed because they've lost their reliable childcare options, and as a result were sort of bouncing their kid temporarily from neighbor to neighbor while trying to navigate this tough situation. And when dropping off this child to Peterson's household, the mom said that the child will probably not eat anything and not to stress over it, which does happen. Children can behave differently around food in different environments, especially unfamiliar ones. However, to Jordan Peterson, this is a tragedy and basically a sign that this mother is somehow habitually starving this child. To rescue this poor unfortunate soul, he enlisted his wife, put this child at the family table, and basically described the whole thing as a horror movie. Here's a quote. 10 not too painful minutes later, he finished his meal. We were all watching intently. It was a drama of life and death. Life and death, people. Because there is nothing more life and death than a 4-year-old who is not accustomed to your environment, not eating a full plate of food. Like, come on. And then he went on to full-on describe the mother of this child as a literal monster, and then mentioned she was a psychologist. I really don't know what is the point that he was trying to make, but I sincerely hope the child is okay now. Then, as another supposed win, Peterson describes how he force-fed his own child. This is not parenting advice. This is like a villain origin story. In another piece, he goes on to claim that human beings are the only social eaters when it comes to the animal kingdom.
Human beings are social eaters, and it's a species characteristic, and that's really weird. Social eating is really weird. Animals don't share food. Like mother birds will feed their chicks, you know.
Right.
But Animals, as a rule, don't share food. Like, human beings aren't like that. Like, we have this, people who are alone don't eat well, generally speaking. They're not even hungry.
So not only Peterson is getting human eating wrong, he's also getting animal biology completely wrong. How about, I don't know, wolves, chimps, elephants, literally any social animal out there? Maybe let's leave the whole food situation to the actual professionals in the field, especially considering that force feeding and other restrictive parental behaviors around food can actually have really harmful consequences later in life. And I am by no means claiming a direct connection here, but it does rub me the wrong way that Peterson's own daughter's eating habits are very much questionable. Well, somehow stopping short of the Third World War, we have fed the children. Now it's probably time to sleep. However, according to Peterson, this is another full-blown tragedy. And look, bedtime can be a battle. Any parent will attest to that. But to Jordan Peterson, it's basically a metaphor for crumbling foundations of the whole Western civilization. This is him describing struggling to put a child to sleep. You may have thought that your kid is just stalling for one more story, but in reality, you're basically dismantling the fabric of society itself. And since bedtime is so hard, one popular and completely valid, amazing technique to help your children shake out their wiggles and sort of burn some energy is to engage in what is often referred to as rough and tumble play. And while it may appear that Jordan Peterson agrees with this, his take on this kind of play is actually as wild as the rest of his takes. Whenever he talks about it, he basically insists that only fathers and sons do it, and that every single boy universally, with no regard to their character and play preferences, must experience this kind of play, or else they will grow up absolutely awkward.
I've played with little boys who haven't had a father, and they're often awkward in their play. They don't know how to react to me first, so they're intimidated. You know, like a not a well socialized dog.
First of all, did he just compare fatherless boys to badly behaved dogs? I think he did. And this also ties in nicely into the fact that Peterson is obsessed with behaviorism, a theory that is really outdated and isn't really applicable to raising human children.
Fathers really like to play with their children, and mothers are often somewhat apprehensive about that because the guys generally will play rougher with the kids than the women will. That's a generalization for all of you who think I'm being sexist, but it's, the behavioral data is pretty clear.
Yeah.
Secondly, moms absolutely do roughhouse, and daughters do roughhouse. Peterson straight up claims that he doesn't talk about it because it's basically a male prerogative. This is likely not so. First of all, there's very little research available on this kind of play involving mothers. And this is closely related to another fact. Play styles are influenced by all sorts of things, including societal norms, parental beliefs, child temperament, and maternal confidence in physical play. And if you think about it, cultural expectations discourage mothers from participating in this kind of play to start with, painting mothers as calm and nurturing, and dads as sort of like wild and fun and energetic. In other words, there's absolutely no scientific reason to believe that rough and tumble play performed by mothers towards sons, or yes, daughters, will not be as beneficial. It probably just has to do with societal perceptions. Everything I've said previously is not really surprising considering Peterson's expectations of 3-year-olds are nothing short of insane. In line with other beliefs not at all supported by modern psychology, according to Jordan Peterson, a properly socialized 3-year-old is polite and engaging, no pushover, evokes interest from other children, is welcomed by adults. Because nothing says developmentally appropriate expectations like expecting a preschooler to behave like Prince Charming. So I think we can all agree that Peterson's advice on parenting is not much different from the rest of his advice. Overly complicated, incredibly dramatic, and often just wrong. And there's nothing wrong with looking for parenting advice, but maybe stick to actual child psychologists with proven track records. Not someone who thinks that force-feeding a kid is some kind of a moral triumph. But of course, Peterson is not the only terrible famous parent. And if you watch this next video, I will prove to you that you are a much better parent than the richest man in the world.